Hello, and welcome to Self-Care is Sexy. My name is Chris, and I'll be your host. We're a podcast that's here to generate and share self-care ideas with each other. Last episode, I did a quick overview of how to use pattern interrupt skills to kind of switch off that autopilot and give you a little bit more free time to help you feel more in charge of your day and to give you some time back for self-care. We also went through a list of different ways that you can easily embed self-care into your daily routine without much work or changes to what you're currently doing. So if you need some easy ways to get yourself leaning towards more self-care, check out that episode. I want to give you a preview of what to expect from today's show. Today, we're talking about progress versus perfection. And so often we're all just out here striving to be the best we can and to live our best lives, but we're also in that losing sight on what's going well, what's working, and really how far we've come. So today we're going to be talking about and really taking a look at your day-to-day to see all the self-care that you're already doing for yourself, as well as give you some good ideas on how to figure out what self-care you might be lacking right now. But first, a few quick housekeeping notes. All right, today is going to be a pretty simple show. I'm not going to make you do any kind of super intuitive, reflective work or think too hard, but I do want to talk about self-care a little bit differently than I normally do. Before I get to the content of today's show, if you're one of my listeners out there and you're really struggling with the most basic self-care, before you listen to this episode or really get into the show, I want you to stop this recording right now and do some small act of self-care. Drink a glass of water, go take a shower, take a nap if you need to, no matter what's going on right now. And come back to this episode when you're ready to learn and digest new information. Once you've tended to the very basics of self-care, because I want you to make sure that you are the priority right now. Like, start planning your bedtime for tonight. And what you're going to do is you're going to start to see the focus right now become you. And that planning is a gift. It's a form of self-care. So just planning for your bedtime for tonight, for tonight's sleep, that is a micro act of self-care that's going to get your brain tuned into taking care of yourself. And that's so important. Okay, so for today's content, I know a lot of folks out there that are really struggling, like I said, with the basics of self-care. So I thought it'd be a really good idea to just make sure that everyone, especially you, is giving themselves credit for the good work they're already doing when it comes to self-care. Or, I think that this is kind of rare in all aspects of life. It's pretty rare that we celebrate our accomplishments or really point out to ourselves and really internalize it when we've done something good or something right or when we've done something well. Like, yeah, you might post some accomplishment on Facebook or something like that, something that you're really proud of, but do you talk to yourself in a way and do you really give yourself credit in a way that is sustainable and fulfills you? Because those little hits of dopamine that you get when you see, all the reactions to a post on Facebook or all the likes that you'll get on Instagram, those kinds of affirmations of what you're doing right and accomplishments are actually pretty hollow and really unfulfilling. When do you actually give yourself that attaboy or that pat on the back or that recognition when you've done something really good for yourself? So I want that to be today's focus. we're going to talk about ways that you can celebrate your progress by highlighting what you're already doing well instead of focusing on that end goal of self-care. And you may be saying, well, I don't have an end goal when it comes to self-care. I just try to take care of myself when I think about it. And that's okay. That makes sense. But most of the time, people who want to focus on self-care enough such that they sought out this podcast, typically the overall goal with self-care is to feel better. Because caring for yourself, giving yourself permission to take care of yourself, it feels good. It's really hard to feel good if you're never reaching that goal, if you're always just striving to feel good. And I'm going to fast forward to the good part, which is self-care does make you feel good, but recognizing that you're doing self-care and what you're doing for self-care and what is working is going to not only make you feel good and feel fulfilled and give you more of a positive, long-lasting hit of dopamine than social media affirmations can give you, it's also going to train your brain into looking for examples and evidence of where self-care is going good for you. And that's so important because any amount of progress that you're making, any little tiny bit, and we all know this, but it's so hard to see that progress is so much more of an accomplishment than reaching the actual goal. And or only reaching that goal some of the time, right? Or every once in a while. It's not sustainable. And so you're not broken and you're not off track if you don't feel good all of the time. You know, welcome to that's just how the human brain works. The brain, the normal human brain, is not set on a default of happiness. I don't know if you know this, but its default setting is actually more of a searching mode. And it's typically searching for what's wrong. What could kill us? You know what I mean? What can we eat or whatever? It's on survival mode. It is not set on that default happiness mode. And maybe that's what this is. This shift that we're all sort of feeling, maybe that's what it's all about. But until that shift happens and we all get to the mode where our brains are set to seeking out and feeling happy and feeling safe and feeling calm, we've got to work with this really outdated software that is our heads, our brains. Because when you're so often focused on, for example, with self-care, if self-care is your goal and you're look, Chris, I've got to learn to take care of myself. I always put myself at the back of the list. I throw myself under my own bus. I'm constantly doing all these things for everyone else and I'm last on the list and I don't feel good. So I showed up to your podcast to hear how I can change that. And my response to that is, if you're thinking all of the time about how you don't have time for self-care or thoughts that you never get any time for yourself or that you're the only one who can do the dishes or take out the trash or, you miss all those opportunities to do things for yourself because you're constantly doing things for everyone else. Well, it's not that you're not getting the self-care. It's that you're either getting the wrong kind of self-care or you're not paying attention to the self-care you do get. Because you cannot go from thinking, I never get time for myself, I'm always at the back of the list, to I feel great about myself, I love myself, I take care of myself, and self-care is a priority. You don't get there from step 1 to step 2 or A to B. It does not work like that. You have to start where you're at and work with your busted ass brain to look at what's going on in your life right now, what's already happening, and look for positive evidence of the self-care you're already getting. And that's what's going to actually create momentum to help you get self-care that's more fulfilling, that's more lasting, and it'll become more of a daily priority instead of just whenever shit hits the fan or life falls apart or you have an illness or something big happens where your only option is self-care. So the best way to get there is to focus on your progress and not your perfection. Because self-help, taking care of yourself, self-care, all of that stuff, if you're constantly worrying about how you're not following through, if you're constantly focused on how you don't have time to apply these little tips, tricks, and hacks that we give you here on the podcast, if you're constantly worried about how you're not getting the self-care you need, you're never going to switch your mentality. You're always going to be looking for perfection instead of focusing on what's going well. What I want us to do today is I want us to all make a list of things that we've already done for self-care. Now, if you just woke up and I'm the first voice you're hearing in the morning, good morning, welcome to your day, and you're like, I have done nothing. I want you to write down as many things as you can think of that you either did yesterday or last night. And I don't want you to just do this mentally in your head. Because again, we're working with very outdated software. And you think that just thinking up all of the things that you do for self-care is going to help you shift your mentality and your focus on what's going well and help you feel better, which is the ultimate goal of self-care. You're not going to get that from just doing a mental list. You need to actually work with the software by writing it down, making a list on your phone, and actually applying what you're digesting right now. Because passively listening is great. Thank you for taking this time for yourself to get encouraged and to hear positivity. But if you really, really want a change, if you really want to stop the habit of throwing yourself under the bus, not having enough time to do what you want to do, taking care of everyone else, and then being too exhausted to help yourself, I really need you to do the smallest act possible, which is just write this list down. Make this list with me. So often in this show, we talk about like what's getting in the way of self-care. We talk about setting boundaries. We talk about how we talk to ourselves. But something that I don't think we spend enough time on, or in general, like all of us in our lives, is looking for what's going right, what is working. And so that's what I want us to do today. I want you to come up with a list of the things that you've done for self-care. And my big focus this last half of the year with the podcast is to help come up with ways to help you refocus your brain towards positivity. So while we typically account for why self-care is hard and what gets in the way, today we're going to be focusing on how good we are at getting self-care. Because I want our habit brains to focus on and find ways that we are taking care of our needs. So if you got up early this morning and you're like, this is the first thing I've heard, you rack your brain for what you did last night, get creative. But if you got up this morning, you brushed your teeth, I want you to write that down. That's an act of self-care. If you recently left an abusive ex, I want you to write that down. That's a huge act of self-care. I want your brains to be looking for ways that you're already getting your self-care in. So I want to share with you my list because I think it'll at least give you some ideas. And It's not to compare. So